So welcome to lecture number, I think this is 8 or so on the Kuzari. Um, I'll be giving page numbers from the Rabbi Korobkin translation. That is this version, the Rabbi Daniel Korobkin, which is the English translation most of you are using. Today we are at paragraph number 90 in the first essay, which appears on page number 104 and the one that I just showed you. And I am going to be reading the Hebrew from this version, the Michael Schwartz, the Hebrew version, which is the Hebrew translation direct from the Arabic. Now, in item 90, we had just completed. Well, first of all, just a little bit more background. The Kuzari, the Khazar king, had asked the Chaver, the rabbi, he had asked him, what's the story of your religion? How did it develop? Where does it come from, and so on? And so he started to get. So the Chaver, the rabbi, started giving him an answer which described the development of the Jewish religion and the Jewish people. And then he asked him a big question, and that is, how could it be that God communicates with human beings? And the Chaver, the rabbi, answered that we don't necessarily understand how, but we know what we experienced. We experienced the exodus from Egypt. We experienced the miracles. We experienced the revelation at Sinai. And in some way, shape, or form, there was a communication that everyone that was there felt, believed, and heard or saw, and therefore we believe that it's true. And that's where it ends. It ended up in paragraph 90, where the Chazar answers Zotana Mishachnat. That is a convincing argument. So the 91 is where we're about to start, and the rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, the author of the book, he kind of runs a few caveats in here, because he doesn't want us to make the philosophical mistake that God actually spoke to us in a physical manner, or that in any way, shape, or form we can understand that communication as if it was physical speech or it was a physical sight. So he's going to re-emphasize that point and say, Amar Chaver. So the Chaver answered him, Eineni posek sha'adavar kach. I am not saying clearly that this is exactly how it happened, right? I'm not, don't think that my description to you is an accurate description of physically and scientifically and physiologically how it occurred. Maybe it was in some other hidden way that I can't really compare. I can't find a comparison. I can't describe it to you. Right. So don't make conclusions from my description that in any way, shape, or form. There was some form of communication, but what that communication was is not something that I can describe. Aval Hamaskana. But the bottom line is that the end of the story is Mikan. That the people that were there, the people that were present during that time, Yodea el Nachon Shadavar min Elohim Tzai. It was clear to them that this was a communication from God. So all of those people experienced it as a communication from God. Exactly how or what, I have no idea, and I can't even try to start explaining it. And he's going to make an argument here and say that it's really a deeper philosophical argument, and that is that, remember, the king of the Chazars asked him, how is it possible that a God, right, who is beyond our ability to comprehend, who is beyond the universe, the created universe, something that we can't see, know, feel, or describe in any way, how could such a being communicate with us here, right? So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is going to answer that by saying, what about the act of creation itself? Isn't the act of creation itself an act of some form of communication between that supreme being that we're calling God and the physical world that we live in? Right? He's saying, just like the original act of creation was, in some way, on some level, it was a form of communication. There's some bridge. I can't describe what that bridge is. I can't describe what that connection is, but there is some connection between God. So what he's really doing, he's attacking the very foundation of the philosophical question. The philosophical question was, how could God, who's beyond the physical realm, communicate with the physical realm? But by the same token, how could God then create the physical realm? Obviously, there's some way of communication, right? Mikan mitkabelet banefashos. So therefore, it was accepted among those among people, among human beings, who amuna, the belief or the faith in in Torah, in the Torah, that came through during these gatherings that we were referring to, the Exodus and this and the revelation at Sinai. Also, it all comes together along with the belief and the idea that God created the world. If he could create the world, then he could communicate with it. Right, in the same way that they saw that he created the tablets, right, the tablets upon which the 10 statements were written, and the manna, all the miracles that they saw were a communication in some way, right, and other things besides that, and the doubts of all of the philosophers, that which were reflected in your question in the first place, were dispelled by this revelation at Sinai. So essentially, the bottom line of the according to Kuzari and according to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, according to the his teachings, is that the way we know, how do we know that there's a God? Because of the witnesses, the witnessed miracles in the revelation at Sinai. Remember, this is very, very different from the argument that Rambam made, who felt that we know through our intellect, through learning, through study, through knowledge, through observing the world around us. Right? It's a very different approach. So just keep that in mind. So Amar Kuzari. All right, so the Kuzari, then I'm at paragraph number 92 now, right? And he's going to ask him the big question, right? So you have just developed this idea, right, that the Jewish people experienced this very, very special revelation, and therefore that gave birth to this people, this nation, right? And that is really the birth of the Jewish people. And from then, all of you guys, right, your people have developed, and, over the years, and that's your origin story, right? But what about, if Sim Leva Chaver, to pay attention, my, Rabbi, don't be, you seem to be so proud of yourself, right? You're praising all of the wonderful praises of your people, of your nation, but you're ignoring the tremendous rebellion that is well known, which kind of contradict these great revelations. Right after all of these big episodes that you're describing, they went and they worshiped the golden calf, and they didn't worship God, they worshiped an idol. So what's so special about you guys, right? How could you think you're calling yourself so special if you went and worshiped the calf just like all the other nations were worshiping idols? So the Chaver, his immediate answer in paragraph 93 is Zehu chet shenisganu bo biglal ma'alasam. He's really saying, and he's going to elaborate in much more detail, which we're about to learn, why he's saying this. But the only reason why the sin really wasn't that big a deal, is really what he's saying. But it was only seemed like such a big deal, and they were criticized so much because they were so great. They were on a level at which they should have known that there was something wrong with this. When somebody is great, and we know this to be true, when a person, is preaches all kinds of things, and then he himself or she herself it violates, some moral code or conduct, or does something unethical, it's a big deal. When nobody expects you to be a great person, then, when you do something wrong, it's not such a big deal. But when a guy who puts himself out there and as a big guy, as someone we should look up to, and then he goes ahead and does something wrong, it's a much bigger deal. So And that's that. So the Chet Egel is similar to that. So the Kuzari says, huh? Right in chapter 94, Zemitoch you're saying that because you're so proud of your people. You think you guys are so great, right? What do you mean? It's not true. This is a terrible sin. How could you think that you're so great if you committed this terrible sin of idolatry, right? You think you're so great, so you're telling me it wasn't so bad. So the Chaver then goes ahead in paragraph 95. The Chaver, the rabbi says, give me a few minutes. I'm going to show you the truth about how great this nation is. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat that what we're about to study right now is an articulation of what is well known as Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's idea of what it means and how the Jewish people became a chosen people. Those of us that tend towards universalistic interpretations of Tanakh and universalistic interpretations of Judaism find this to be the hardest and most difficult part of this book to swallow, right? You can see interesting articles out there. It might be worth looking at them, contrasting the universalism that is inherent in the Maimonides philosophy versus the particularism, which is very deeply embedded in Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's philosophy. So if it rises in your soul a little bit of a feeling of difficulty, it's not for naught. You're not the only scholar that finds some issues with what we're about to study. This is one of those areas where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is going to explain to us why there's an inherent specialness to the Jewish people, which is really based on, well, I mean, nowadays we would call it genetics, right? It's something that's inherent within us because it's something we've inherited from our parents and from their parents and from their parents, right? So the only thing that I do want to mention before we study this is I want to remind you of the context of history within which this arose, right? This arose in a time of history when the Jewish people were, as the name of this book suggests, despised and being bounced from place to place and persecuted wherever they went. And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was trying to instill pride within the Jewish nation and the Jewish people at a time when everyone else around them was stepping on us and saying that we were anything but special. So he was giving, that doesn't necessarily answer all of the problems that one might have with what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is about to tell us, but at least it puts it in a context which makes it a little bit easier to accept. But if someone, but however, this has become a significant mode of thought among the difference between the particularist philosophers and the universalist philosophers. This is really the primary argument for particularism, for something special about the Jewish people, something inherently special. So if you like that, fine, that's your thing. If you don't, then you have the Rambam to hang your hat on, the universalistic notion of the Rambam. Remember, according to the Rambam, he very explicitly said that the thing which made the Jewish people special was the fact that Avraham Avinu Abraham went through the intellectual endeavor on his own of discovering God. And that's an endeavor that every human being has access to, right? It's something that we achieved based on our intellectual and moral and ethical work, right? As opposed to something that we inherited from our parents. But now I have to say that before we study this so that you understand this in context. But here it goes. Omar Hechaver, says the rabbi, he says, give me a minute to explain myself. I just said that sentence. I'm in paragraph 95 and I'm on page in the Korobkin book. That is page 106. Edus maspekes lazos be'enai. He shall him lokach osam lechelek ulomim veinumus olam. Right. I am going to tell you, right. Number one, right. God chose us, right. God chose the Jewish people from all the nations. He chose the Jewish people. And the fact remains that the word of God resides within the Jewish people, right? And to the extent that event that we just discussed before, the revelation at Sinai, was revealed to them. There clearly is something special about them. So that in and of itself proves that fact. All the way, the women and everyone was exposed to this this great revelation. There were prophetesses, right? Women that were prophets. Remember, and this is in a time when women didn't quite have the same respect they have today, to put it mildly. So to say that even women had it is a tremendous statement, right? Even though prior to this event, the revelation at Sinai, only very specific individuals and only men had revelations like this. And why is it that how did this all start? And this is a history which is, it's based to some degree on a certain interpretation of certain Ma'amorei Chazal, right? The Kuzari and among other Jewish philosophers that took a more particularistic attitude, right? They understood Chazal in certain ways. Rambam, and we studied this together, we studied Rambam before, looks at most of these sources in an extremely different way. But so the Kuzari is not, I wouldn't say that he's making this up. He's not. He's basing this on a lot of Divrei Chazal, things from the rabbinic literature, but it's the way he interpreted them. So Adam, the first man, he was perfect without any flaws, any problems, anything. And he has this idea, right? When human beings create a human being, right? So then the flaws that I have, that a woman that I'm with has, is going to be passed in some level to the child that we have, right? And then the flaws of that child's upbringing. No parents are imperfect, so no child's going to be perfect. The upbringing that the child has within his or her environment, and the foods that he or she eats, and the illnesses that he or she has, and so on, will affect that person so that he or she won't be a perfect human being. But Adam didn't have that. He was created perfect. God himself created Adam, right? So there was nothing from the father and nothing from the mother, and nothing from the food and nothing from the environment that he grew up in, right? And nothing from the air and that he breathed, and the water and the land that he grew up in. He was created whole as a young man. He was complete in how all of his measurements and how he was made. His body was perfect. So he had a perfect, complete soul and a perfect, complete intellect. With all of the most perfect abilities that a human being can have from the moment of his creation. And also the koach eloki, the spiritual abilities that Adam had, acharei haseichel, right? Kilomar hadarga, the ability that he was able to connect to spirituality. V'yeda es hamitos, b'li limod b'machshava kala v'yoser, without even learning, right? He didn't have to learn. He didn't have to train all of his abilities. He just had. So remember, this is an idea that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is telling us through the Kuzari, right? And this is not necessarily a fundamental Jewish thought. Remember, Rambam dramatically would have opposed this sentence, this paragraph, right? I mean, we studied it together. We learned how Rambam understood Adam and Eve. We learned how Rambam understood how Avraham Avinu, Abraham himself, had to work and achieve in order to attain the ability to access spirituality and to communicate and to achieve the levels of prophecy. Rambam he would not have liked this paragraph at all. He would have said that's impossible. The concept, the idea that a human being should automatically have a spiritual connection to prophetic wisdom would be anathema to the Rambam. Okay, I'm pointing that out because I'm trying to show the very dramatic differences between these two great minds. Ben Elohim. So therefore he's called by us. And remember, the Torah doesn't say this about Adam. This is based on tradition. This is based on his idea of Adam having been created as a perfect human being. And he and everyone from that was like him, that inherited that quality from him, were considered like sons of God, almost like angels. Who holded Yiladim Rabbim? He had many children. Ish mehem lo hitim lios memalei mekom adam zulas Hevel. But the only one that was worthy of was Abel, was Hevel, was his one son. Kihu damalo, because he was similar to him. The kashehora goso Kain achiv, and when he was killed by his brother Cain, right? Mitoch china al dargazos, because he was jealous of the fact that his brother was on that level. Hitan lo kapitzu sheis. So then, as a replacement, God had Shes or Seth be born. Asher Dama la Adam, he was similar to Adam. He was his seed. He was the one that carried on the heritage of Adam. Zulaso hayu kikliposu chitmarim, and instead, and other than him, there were others that were kind of like the shells and the seeds that were thrown out, or the fruits that didn't quite develop as good as they should have. There was lots of other people, but the perfect one was Shes. Uskulas Shes, and after that was Enosh. Became nidbak hadavar benoach, and so on until it came to Noah. Through individuals. So he was the seed. He was the main one. These were the ones that were called the sons of God. They were perfect in their bodies and the way they were built. B'midos, their measurements, and their lengthy lives. Biadios, in their knowledge of Yicholos, and in their abilities and strengths and skills. And that it was through them that the Torah counted the years of history, because they were the ones that carried this banner of being the human being that had this spiritual aspect to them. Occasionally, there was a person in that line that didn't quite have that spiritual quality to him. Kugon Terach, like Terach, who was the father of Avraham, who we know was not the greatest human being, right? Abel Beno Avram, but his son, he was a Talmud, a student of Sabo Eber, of his grandfather. So it sometimes might skip a generation, but this quality kept on going, right? Yesra Ken Avram Chai B'Mino Chatzmo. More than that, if you figure it out, according to his calculations, Abraham would have been alive during the days of Noach's life because of the length of Noach's life and so on. So he was able to inherit it, even though it had skipped a generation from his father. His father was an absent generation of this quality. So this can go to grandchildren too. So Avraham, so he ended up inheriting from his grandfather Aver, Nikra Ivri, which is why Abraham is called an Ivri, because he had the quality of Aver, his grandfather. The Aver Skulas, so the name Hebrew comes from Abraham's grandfather, who was Aver, which is Ivri, which is Hebrew. The Aver Skulas Shoshem, and he had the special quality that Shem had, right? The son of Noach, and so on. The Shem Skulas Noach, like I just said, Kihu Yarsham Shalazorim Shebahem Ha'aklim Mimuzog, right? Asher B'Mer Kazam Meitavam Eretz Yisrael, and he inherited them, right? Because he had within him the special qualities of the special land within which this type of relationship to God is specific to, which is, of course, the land of Israel, Eretz HaNavuah, the land of prophets. But the other children that didn't reside in, that didn't go to the land of Israel, Yefes, Yatzal Tzafon, he went to the north, V'cham L'darom, and Cham went to the south. Uskulas Avram Mikalbanov, and from all of his Abraham's sons, who was the special one? Who was Yitzchak, Isaac, who Hirchik as Kol Yiladav Me'aretz Hazos HaMiyuchedes Shekidei Shetia Miyuchedes LiYitzchak, right? And Abraham got all of the other children besides Yitzchak. He sent them away to other lands, because only Yitzchak, only Isaac should be in the land, the Holy Land, the land of prophecy, because only he had this special quality. Skulas Yitzchak Yaakov, and his special child was Yaakov or Jacob. Achiv Esav, and he pushed his brother was pushed out. Esau was pushed out. So he was worthy of being in this land, this special land. Yalde Yaakov, but the children of Yaakov, Kulam Segula, all of them were special. Kulam Hayuksherim Ladavar Alaki, they were all worthy of this special spiritual nature. Haim Kiblas Hamakam Hamyucha Ladavar Alaki, and they inherited that land, which is the special place where this godliness resided. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm going to take a drink. All right. At this point, it is now a special quality of a group as opposed to an individual. Right? Before it was only individuals. And God accepted it upon himself to guard them, to allow them to grow and become great in Mitzrayim and Egypt. Like when you find a tree that has good fruit and has good roots, you grow it until it brings out really good fruits that are similar to the original fruit. So, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Yosef, Echav, right? Because of this special seed, and now it's growing into Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and all of the brothers. Haprio, Fia, B'Moshe, Alav Shalom, Aaron, and Miriam, Alayhim Shalom, and Moses, and Aaron, and Miriam, all came from this tree. Uvanoshim, and other people, Kamo, B'Tzalel, V'Alihav, those were the two people that were responsible for designing and building the Mishkan, the tabernacle. V'Roshei Hashvatim, and the heads of all of the tribes. And the 70 elders who were special, special for prophecy, for they prophesied time on end. Yoshua and Joshua, Caleb, Caleb, Bechor, Barabim, Zulasim, and many others like them. They were worthy of having the special light of God shine upon them. So this idea that it's really a genetic quality. It's something that's passed from generation to generation, straight from Adam down, eventually to the Jewish people. This is what the argument that the Chaver is placing before the king of the Chazars. Zos, this even though, and now once it resides among this people. So even though among those people there are those who rebel and are terrible. There are those, not all of the people of the Jewish people were great. There were plenty of sinners, right? Elashem lulo suffix skula, but they still have this special quality, and with no doubt, move on. Shem b'tivam, it's within their very nature, uvamizgam, and how they're made up, skula, this special quality, umolidim mishu skula, so that they passed on to their children, even if they're not perfect. But of hamamre, right? Nishmeres askula amoreves bo amafia bialdo. If you have a father who's doesn't behave properly, it's still within him, mixed within him, the special quality that comes out in his children or his grandchildren, according to because of the purity of his seed. So just like we said by Terach, he himself didn't have the special spiritual quality, but it was within his nature to give birth to that special quality. Right? But in the other children of Cham and Yefes, the other children of Noah, they didn't have this special quality. We see similar things in nature, right? You have an apple tree, right? And there's 10 apples that grow. Some of them grow nice apple trees, and some of them grow ugly apple trees that give bad apples, and some of them don't even grow trees that don't give apples at all. So the few that grow the good apples, those are the good ones, right? We see this all the time. So many times we see people who inherit qualities that are more similar to their grandparents than their parents. Clearly, these were these qualities were in the father. They just weren't brought out. They weren't gluyim lachush. They weren't revealed. The special quality of Aver, the original Hebrew, right, was hidden among some of his descendants until it became revealed with Abraham. So now, I want to stop here for a moment and ask you guys to tell me what your thoughts are about this idea. This is I don't know how I'm gonna like. This is public. I'm online, right? And I'm talking to people, and I'm saying something. I'm not hiding my feelings, even though that's hard to say. The thought process of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has so many beautiful things that we've encountered until now, but this idea that has become embedded in certain parts of Jewish philosophy, to me, is extremely problematic for a lot of reasons. But I that's my own bias, and I'm admitting that up front. But let me hear from you. I want to hear from you guys what you think about this so far. Maybe you can help me here. All right, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Well, just what about Adam and his not obeying God's commandment? He seems to forget that when he says Adam was a perfect. We've always been taught that, well, he didn't listen to God. He ate from the tree of knowledge.
Yeah. But I mean, his entire depiction of Adam is not reflected in the psukim, in the verses that we read Bereshis, right?
Yeah.
His depiction of Adam is anything but this depiction of this perfectly spiritual being, right? And now, I'm not saying that he has no basis for this, because there is basis in Chazal and the oral tradition, stories that make Adam out to be that way, right? But one, which is fine, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with sticking with oral traditions. That's totally cool. But the thing is that when you read the verses, there is a reason why the Torah chose not to depict Adam as a perfect person, right? And now Rabbi Yehuda Levi is deliberately choosing to depict him in a way that the Torah does not portray him, right? Now, this is not the only time we will find philosophers and thinkers depicting biblical figures in ways that the Bible itself describes very differently. I mean, I'm sure all of you can think of examples with a snap of a finger, right? But this is such a case, right? And it's something we can talk about for lecture after lecture after
Okay.
lecture.
Okay. Well, let me then address the main point.
Yeah.
How many times have all of us read the number of Nobel Prize winners? And statistically, it's incredible that there's so many Jews. This idea of a superiority through the genes is kind of built into modern Jews, and it's not as uh, uh, it's not offline. We have trouble with this because of eugenics, because of what we saw with Hitler and all that. And because we're Americans and all men are created equal. But I don't find this so out of line with the modern thought that we all live with.
Is it good or bad? Barry, I see you wanted to say something.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of marketing to the Kuzari, that I'm surprised the Chaver didn't try to bring up the notion of the history contains miracles, and that's how we experienced the community experienced God and became open to a covenant. And the covenant guides our lives, and it um, is our resource. And if you're inviting somebody in, you can say, this isn't an exclusive covenant. You're invited. So
yeah, well, first of all, you're making really good points. First of all, he started that way, not tonight, but in last lecture, right? We learned he started by talking about the covenant and by talking about the miracles that we experienced. But then tonight we read, right, him stating openly that if God chose to make the miracles for us, there must have been something special about us to begin with. So had he not taken, right? No, it's fine. You're good. You're
I
bringing
heard
out.
your lectures on YouTube, but usually I was falling asleep at the time.
That's okay.
Not your fault. Just
No,
late at
it's
night.
fine. It's fine. But the thing is, though, is that you're right. Like, had he just continued on that path, I wouldn't have this problem. But he went, and then he said, well, if we're having these miracles and we're having this special revelation, there must have been something special to begin with. And then he goes on and explains that there's something inherently special that we inherited from our parents. Literally, he said, within the seed, within the sperm from our fathers, we've got some special, if he didn't care about what we got from our mothers as much. Within the seed from our fathers, right, we have this specialness that just made us special. And you're right, like Jeffrey made a point, like, it's in here. We still talk with this language, and it's but I hope most of us understand the danger inherent in this, and the way this can be extraordinarily racist. But I want to hear what other people have to say, because I'm just putting it out there. I want to be as intellectually honest as I possibly can, so I'm trying. So go ahead. If anyone else has comments. Martin, go ahead.
I was just a little surprised about the fact that from what I heard, like Abraham there was really nothing particularly special or different about him. He was one in the long lineage of these really good spiritual people, and there was not this Lech Lecha moment. I didn't hear that in what she said. It really.
I love that point, because think for a moment about, and I know you may not have been with us when we learned Rambam, that part where he discusses Avram directly, but I've definitely mentioned it many times, and you were there, right? Where the Rambam understands Avram exactly the way you trying to describe him, as not having inherited something special from his grandfather, but having been a uniquely special individual who on his own discovered God, right? In other words, so what the Rambam then says is Abraham didn't inherit anything special. It could have been Abraham, it could have been Joe Schmo, it could have been the chieftain of the Navajo Indian tribe, right? But whoever it was who discovered God through that personal work and intellect is the one who achieved that spirituality, which is a much, much more universalistic understanding of how Abraham became Abraham, as opposed to the understanding that the Kuzari said, washing off all of the special. He didn't mention a thing about, and you made the exact point. I love what you said. He didn't say anything about Lech Lecha, right? About God giving Abraham a command, go off, leave, and he followed, right? Or any of the special tests that Abraham had in front of God. He didn't say how when God wanted to destroy Sodom, Abraham demanded justice and righteousness, and he didn't go through any of these things. How Abraham welcomed guests in his homes, right?
Or the Akedah.
Or the Akedah, or any of the tests that he did. All of a sudden, the only thing was Abraham inherited it from his grandfather. So I love your point. It's a great point, because this is a dramatically different, and you'll see as we go through the Kuzari and as we've learned until now. And I love how Barry brought out what he mentioned before, that like it was going the right way. Like it seemed good. Like I liked it. Like, we all experienced this relationship and the miracles of the Exodus and the revelation at Sinai. We experienced all this together. And then all of a sudden, it just like he pulled the rug out from under it, and it became, we got it from our grandfather. Like we didn't do nothing. We just got it. And the ramifications, and what Barry pointed out too, if you're trying to sell it to someone, right? How can somebody convert and join you if he doesn't have that grandfather, right? Which is going to be a problem that the Kuzari is going to deal with. So as we go through this book together, we're going to find there are going to be cases like there have been until now, where what Rabbi Yehuda Levi has to tell us will light our souls on fire and will sound beautiful. And then there are things like this, which just like, oh my goodness, like what? It's one thing to tell this to a people when they're suffering and they're downtrodden and they're stepped on and they're being slaughtered and killed and forcibly converted and thrown out of this part of Spain to that part of Spain, and from the other part of Spain to the other part of France, and this part, wherever you go, we're being slaughtered and killed and exiled. Right. And to tell us, be proud because of who you are and because of your answer. Okay. It's one thing to tell it there, but this is posterity. This book wasn't only written then. I mean, it was written then, but we're reading it today, 1,000 years later. Right. So it has ramifications throughout the centuries that have become so deeply ingrained in the way we think that it's a challenge. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, I'm just being honest. It's hard for me to read. But I still read this book for the tremendous value that we gain from the other things. But this is very problematic to me, But you find echoes when you hear people say things that on many levels are beautiful. Every Jewish soul, you hear people from Chabad movement say this all the time. Every Jewish soul is a special spark, and we're going out to revive that Jewish soul. And no matter who he is or she is, no matter where he is, no matter where she is, no matter where they are spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, we're going to go and help them. And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. That's amazing. That's spectacular. But what about the soul next door, who had a different grandfather? It's a challenge. It's hard. You have to how do you deal with this? I'm not going to give answers because it's too hard. It's too much to answer. But something we really need to think about. What would Rambam's answer have been? is make the moral, ethical, and intellectual do the work, and whoever you are, you can achieve it. You can get there. It doesn't matter who your grandfather was, right? Barry, go ahead.
So if I were marketing on the basis of the outstanding characters in our history, and you brought up Abraham, I think it would be an appealing factor that our experience that Abraham was able to argue with God. And isn't that an appealing, wouldn't that appeal to some ruler here, that he could argue about separate God striking down the wicked and leaving the righteous, or weighing the wicked versus the righteous in a city? So, and wouldn't it be a pickup for our own people that we think, well, I don't know if we accept that that kind of viewpoint anymore, that we're able to argue with God. I mean, maybe Tevye the Milchiger could.
Yeah. Well, it is certainly part of our culture to argue with God, and Abraham is certainly the first major example of someone who argued with God in that way. So, but let's take this thought and let's see what the Kuzari, what the Khazar king answers. This is in paragraph 96. So right now in the Korobkin English version that you guys are looking at, I am on page number 111. Okay, but again, I'm reading from the Schwartz Hebrew version. So Amar Kuzari. So the Khazar king says, okay. The truth, the Khazar king's answer is remarkable in and of itself, because I would imagine the Khazar king getting pissed off and saying, who the hell, excuse my language, do you think you are? Right? You know, we are all children of Adam, right? If you're telling me it comes from Adam, then I'm a child of Adam, he's a child, and she's a child, and they're a child, no matter where they are, right? If that's where it comes from, I mean, that would be my answer. And trust me, most of the world would answer that way. But that's not how Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has the Khazar king answering. So he says, so I see the special kind of thing that comes from Adam. Adam that he was the most honorable, most perfect creature that was created. So mikan mischayev shatem nechbadim mitkoyesvar. So now I understand why you guys are special among all the peoples of the land, which is not how the Khazar king probably really answered, if there ever was such an actual conversation. I can hardly imagine him answering this that way, but okay. But bottom line, what's about the sin? What about the sin of the golden calf, right? You're telling me they're such great people. So what's this business with worshiping the golden calf, right? I mean, that's clearly contradicting everything you said. I'm looking, and I only have 15 minutes to do a very long explanation of the golden calf sin. Part of me wants to do it, and part of me wants to leave it for next time. Let's see. Maybe we can do it in 15 minutes. Let's try. Okay. You know what? I'm going to switch just for this purpose of this answer, because I don't know. It's not my favorite part of the book, I'll be honest. But let's. I'm gonna do it. So this is paragraph 97 now. I'm still on page 111. I'm just gonna go through the English, and so this way it goes a little quicker. Okay. We get the point. I'm reading from the Korobkin translation. The rabbi answered, so in those days, everybody worshipped images. And I'm going to paraphrasing too. So I'm paraphrasing the paraphrasing of the paraphrasing, right? Even if philosophers had been able to prove that to everyone the existence of the one omnipotent God, people always wanted images. They want an image, okay? Right? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is going to tell us some points that is true today. Everybody wants something they can hold in their hand, whether it's a rosary or a cross or a mezuzah. They want something they can look at and say, oh, I'm going to pray to this, or I'm going to kiss this, and I'm going to hold this special by my heart, and this is going to represent my God, right? We want an image, right? People, I don't fully understand it, but it's true. And it's interesting because we're about to read that this is something that was in the past, but it's not. It's in the present too. Everyone wants an image, right? So this is because they would focus their attentions upon that image and profess to the masses that the divinity attaches itself to that image, and that is unique in some supernatural way. There's some supernatural power to this image. You watch any stupid movie and a horror movie, and someone holds up a cross, and somehow the cross drives the devil away. Like, what the hell? It's a piece of wood, right? It's an image, right? If anything, the Bible would tell you get rid of the image, right? And you worship God. Not an image has no power. It's a thing, right? It's a piece of wood. Or in our case, people think a mezuzah protects them from something evil coming into their house. It's not unique to one religion. We have it in our religion too. It's an image, and we think some special divinity is going to protect us because of that image, right? Some would attribute this uniqueness directly to God. So, and then they would say, well, this image has power because of its relationship to God. So we do something like this today when we treat certain places with special reverence. We have a certain place. This is a holy place, right? We will even consider the soil on the rocks of these places as sources of blessing. A little dust from here, and it's a special source of blessing. Others would attribute the image's supernatural qualities to a star, a planet, a constellation. The masses wouldn't accept any religion unless they gave you an image, right? Everyone wants to know, okay, I like your religion. It sounds good. What do I hang up on my wall, to show that I'm part of this religion? I need a picture. Tell me what I need to hang, right? So that's what people want. So he says during this period, so what happened by the egel, by the golden calf, right? Israel was waiting, right? For Moshe, it said he's going to come and bring them teachings from God. And he goes up to the mountain, right? And they're waiting for him to come down with an image, right? Because that's what they want. This historically, that's what everybody in those days wanted. That's what he wanted too, right? So they would gaze and concentrate upon the pillars and would exalt them by bowing down to God's presence in front of them. So this is what they did when they saw the cloud and the pillar of fire, right? They gazed upon those images and they used that as an intermediary towards God. They behaved the same way with the pillar of cloud that descended upon Moshe when God spoke with him, right? Every image that they saw, this is an image that somehow they used to bring them closer to God. The nation heard the 10 commandments, and he comes and brings the tablets and puts them in an ark. So there you have your image, right? Now remember the difference, according to Rabbi Levi, that those images were given to us by God. God said, here is an image, you can use this, right? As opposed to another image which you make up on your own. Right now, between you and me, right, Rambam, right, would have said something very different. Rabbi Levi is saying, right, that an image that's given to us by God to use as some sort of medium, and I don't mean, God forbid, that Rabbi Levi says that we worship the image. Of course not. But an image that's given to us by God, we can contemplate that image and use it to get closer to God. And Rambam might sort of sometimes, to some level, agree with that. But the Rambam doesn't, he wouldn't have explained it the same way, right? It's not, and the difference, no images are good, and God doesn't give us images, right? These things are meant to be used in order to instill in us certain ideas. But according to Rabbi Levi, the objective was for them to have some tangible item that they could focus upon. So remember, this is controversial, right? But he's saying this, that these images were given to us as a tangible thing that we could focus on, something that would contain a record of the covenant between God and Israel and a divine creation, namely the tablets themselves. Additionally, there was a cloud of divine glory over the ark and so on. The people patiently waited for Moshe to descend from the mountain, and they retained their holy status all this time. They didn't do anything bad. They remained special. They didn't change their appearance, their jewelry, their clothes. They were, remember, he used those same descriptions when he talked about the people in Egypt. They maintained their special identity as the Jewish people. They stayed where they were, awaiting Moshe's return. He waited for 40 days. He didn't even take any food with him, right? And when he left, it was assumed that he was going to come back that day, right? And there's other commentaries that agree with his assessment of the verse, right? It was then that an evil thought overtook a small minority of the nation, right? And that minority started thinking, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Moshe must be dead. So how are we going to work this out? So they fought among themselves, and I turned to page 114, right? In proposing various ideas, and a group of them said, let's make a tangible object, just like everyone else. Their intent was not to deny God. Their intent was to have a tangible object they can use in order to worship, in order to somehow use that as an intermediary between them and God, right? This is what the Philistines did, and so on. Their sin was therefore making an image which was forbidden to them, right? Their sin was they did, instead of making an image which God told them to make, right? Like the tabernacle or the ark and so on. They made an image that they decided on their own to make in order to act as an intermediary. They further sinned by ascribing divinity to something which they themselves had constructed without the sanction of God. That's the key difference here, right? Their defense is that all of this arose as a result of mass confusion, right? And they defended themselves, and in defense of them, I would say that they did this under duress because they were confused and they didn't understand why wasn't Moshe coming. Furthermore, you should know that the number of sinners was only 3,000 within a group of 600,000. So it was a small minority. It wasn't the whole people. And that minority made a mistake, which wasn't meant to deny God. It was meant simply to create an intermediary, which was wrong, which was bad, but it's not as bad as you're trying to describe it, right? The defense, what about the leaders, and most specifically Aaron, right, who assisted? Their intent was purely to expose the sinners from among the believers in order to execute the sinners who worshipped it, right? That was what their intent was. And this was preceded, Rabbi Krupkin makes in the note, Rabbi Sadia go and says the same thing. I'm not aware of that being before that in Chazal, but regardless, he wasn't the first philosopher to make that suggestion. The sin was not a departure from worshiping God who took them out of Egypt. It was rather a revolt against a fraction of his commandments. A little bit of one of the things he said, don't make images. They made an image. God commanded them not to, and they did. They should have continued waiting instead of relying on their own intellects and making something to concentrate upon. They shouldn't have built an altar and made sacrifices. And they were motivated by, and I'm on page 116 now, right? By the seers and astrologers who thought that their actions were based on logic and therefore highly accurate. Here we have a little thing, don't follow logic too much, which again would have been, Rambam probably wouldn't have said something like that, right? But in reality, they were like the fool we mentioned above, who entered the office of the doctor and killed people who normally would have been healed by the very same medicines. There are appropriate places for these kinds of things to make, like the tabernacle itself, like the ark itself, right? Like he mentioned, but that's because God told us to make those things. But if you're not following the right instructions and you decide on your own which thing to do for what, you're going to end up making a mistake. Nevertheless, the nation's intention was not to depart from serving God. On the contrary, they believed that they were refining their worship of him. That's why they came to Aaron and told him, right? If they were really trying to rebel against God, do you think they would have came to Aaron? Of course not, right? So the reason for this sin seems so great in our eye. Why is it that nowadays it seems so great? And here's where I think Rabbi Levi is flat out wrong, right? Because, and I know that sounds like chutzpah on my part to say it, but I'll say it anyway, right? Because the reason seems so great because nowadays most nations do not worship images. I tend to disagree with that statement. Maybe in his day, most people didn't. I think today the worship of images is worse than it ever, possibly worse than ever was in history. Way too many of us know people that rely on images of all types and sorts, which they think have all kinds of random divine powers, which are 100% nonsense. Anyway, so we still worship images and we still have this problem. But okay, that's just me. If you disagree with me, fine, that's your right. But anyway, Rabbi Levi is saying because nowadays we don't worship images anymore, right? In those times, we could go make fun of somebody bowing down at an idol at the same time that we go and maybe we don't prostrate ourselves, but we go and worship other images that are just as ridiculous. Okay, fine. I got on my soapbox again. But in those times, what
are you talking about?
How many times do people literally worship items, worship things? How many stories have you heard about holy items that saved people?
Okay.
It's simply not. It's just not. It's a problem.
Is it a Jewish context? I mean, I
in Jewish and non-Jewish context, in every religion that I'm aware of, including our own.
Okay.
And that's worshiping images. I'm sorry, it is. Now I know that they're going to defend it.
Worshiping a car. I mean, worshiping a house.
Yeah. Materialism.
And materialism is another example at another level. It's true. People, we attribute powers to things, godly powers to things all the time.
Okay.
And it's simply it's from a Maimonidean perspective, it's complete blasphemy, right? from Rabbi Yehuda Levi's perspective, you can say, if God commanded us to make that image, then you can say, okay, right? So that would work maybe for a mezuzah, right? But for almost everything else, it don't work. And then, well, people, this rabbi said, and that rabbi said that if you hang this, then you'll have that. That's literally worship of images. In those times, however, people were very susceptible because all nations everybody was worshiping images back then, right? So had their sin been confined to the building of an edifice of their own design, think about it for a minute, okay? If you went to a synagogue, right, just a random place, I don't care, in some placeville, right, and they told, and they had some holy item in the front, and they told you, our great rabbi so and so 100 years ago told us that if we make this special thing, right, this special thing will give us protection from whatever. I'm sure that you guys can think of similar stories, maybe not exactly verbatim the way I described it. You could think of holy items like this. It's spread around our religion everywhere, right? How is that different from an Egel Hazav? How? Tell me. How is it different? It's no different. It's Egel Hazav. People decided on their own to make an image, right? And that this image will somehow protect us, right? To me, it's not even different, not even the slightest iota. The only difference is that, I'll defend those people by saying that they're just ignorant. Whoever this supposed great rabbi was simply ignorant, if he actually said such a thing, right? And the people following it are also ignorant. So that's my only defense, is ignorance. But if you learn the Torah, then it's clearly wrong, right? We don't believe in images. That's just what the Torah is trying to teach us against, right? And focusing on God for offering sacrifice and otherwise for honoring him, we would not consider it a terrible crime, right? So had it been, had their sin been confined to building an edifice of their own design for worshiping God or for offering sacrifices, we wouldn't have thought it was terrible, right? That is because today we do build edifices of our own choosing. We build big buildings and draw blessing from them. And we even suggest that divine presence hovers over these places and the angels congregate around them. And were it not for the fact that we need to come together for prayer, this concept would seem foreign. And so it was during the reign of the kings in Israel. So, in other words, he's saying, people, all they really did was build. It's similar to building a big shul, right? A big synagogue with a nice temple with beautiful pictures and paintings and stained glass windows and chandeliers and domed ceilings, right? And then say that God resides there. We're building an edifice, right? And the truth is that the only logic behind doing that, the only reason why that's okay is because it is a good thing for people to get together and pray. So we do need to build buildings for people to get together in, right? So we might even suggest that the divine, okay. So it was during the reign of the kings in Israel. The leaders protested against the religionists who made temples for worship called bamos. Right, people were making their own altars. So and the prophets protested against that because you weren't supposed to make your own place. You're supposed to come to the temple in Jerusalem. The righteous kings of the time would destroy them to prevent people from doing anything, from exalting these buildings other than the temple that God had chosen and designed. By contrast, the Keruvim were not a foreign concept to them, since God had commanded their construction. Nonetheless, despite this, even though Rabbi Yehuda Levi almost pretty much just justified the sin of the golden calf, right? He pretty much just compared it to building a nice shul, right? However, nonetheless, despite this, and I'm at the top of page 118, those who worshipped were punished and executed. Remember, because that was not commanded by God. That's the bottom line difference. All the other things we said that are also very similar in concept were not our own idea, right? The number executed was only around 3,000 out of 600,000. The sustaining manna, the manna didn't stop falling, nor did the protective clouds dissipate. The people were still protected. The pillar of fire stopped leading them at nighttime. They were deprived of nothing that had been given to them, except for, which is kind of contradicted by some people, Chazal, where it talks about the crowns that were taken away from the people at the sin of the golden calf, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. He later prayed to have another set of tablets given to them and fulfilled, and their sin was pardoned. So that's how he explained the sin of the golden calf. I went a little bit over my time. I usually like to end a few minutes early so I can open the floor for questions. But or not questions or comments or observations, or if I said something that made somebody upset, please tell me. But so we just finished 97, right? So next time we'll start from 98. All right, I'm opening the floor.
Wasn't this the same thing that Maimonides said about animal sacrifice? That it doesn't really do anything, but people were used to it, so we have to excuse it because it was part of their historical experience.
Yeah.
It sounds like the same thing we read when we read the Guide to the Perplexed.
It's similar. I mean, there are similarities, but you know, so but the Rabbi Levi here it's a little bit of a different context, but there certainly are similarities. And but the context here is that those are God-given commandments, right? To use these actions, these rituals or symbols in order to serve me, as opposed to things that we came up with on our own. Right.
Okay.
And that's the key difference according to Rabbi Levi. The key difference is stuff you make up on your own versus stuff that you're commanded to by God to do. Right.
Okay.
Now, the Rambam took pains to explain even those things that were given to us by God as not being symbols or images to be worshipped, right? But rather logical devices through which we can come to recognize the truth of God, right? So those are the difference between these two philosophers on that. So tonight we learned through some of the more troubling parts of the Kuzari, but this is why I wanted to learn this book, because I want to expose everybody to everything. But go ahead. Yeah.
So there are times when people need a party.
Okay.
And, you know, Moshe was worried about this party he heard going on when he came down.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, maybe a king should know that people need diversions. If you want to rule, you have to give people, you know, good food and a chance to party. But I don't know. But
maybe that's what the holidays are for. But okay.
Yehuda Halevi didn't seem to want to criticize Aaron for his pretending that he threw the miracle when he threw the gold into the fire and it came out as an object.
Yeah, even though the Torah itself was critical. You know, the Torah itself was critical, right? Rabbi Levi didn't want to criticize him.
No. Okay. I'm reading that in the translation from Safaria, it says the evil spirit came over the people and they did this. I don't know if that was a good translation of the Hebrew. If it said evil ruach, an evil wind, or an evil.
I'd have to look back at that. I just closed, but okay.
Not a yetzer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other observations?
No, thank you.
If there aren't, I hope you enjoyed this class. And if I made anyone upset, please feel free to let me know. And I look forward to continuing the study, because there's still a lot for us to learn. So I hope we enjoyed it. So anyway, welcome. We'll study again next week together. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Saul.
You're welcome. All right.